Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of No Capes, the show where we talk about creator owned comics with creators who own comics. Joining me today is the amazing Jim Zub of Stone Star, Baldur's Gate, and many more comics that I personally love. Jim, could you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I've been doing comics for quite a while, but probably some titles people would know that I've worked on. A lot of work for hire stuff like the Avengers. I've done work on Black Panther and the Agents of Wakanda. I wrote Champions. I've done a lot of work on Conan the Barbarian and Dungeons and Dragons. And then on the creator owned front, I've also done titles like you mentioned, Stone Star, Glitter Bomb. I've done Skull Kickers and Wayward. So a lot of stuff at Image, and always love being able to balance out doing the commercial stuff with creator owned.
Yeah,
And
that's
it's nice to be able to do both. Yeah,
it's got to be good doing that. I haven't read Glitter Bomb yet. I saw that the other day, and I'm going to add that to my list. But I did back the
awesome.
Skull Kickers RPG Kickstarter, and I'm looking forward to
Oh,
that.
thank you. I really appreciate it. Yeah. So Skull Kickers wrapped up. Oh, geez, I want to say 5 years ago, but it's the 10th anniversary of the original launch of the series, and I wanted to do something special for it. So rather than just doing like a reprint, I thought let's do a new anniversary story. And so my career has gone in such a fun direction where I'm doing more and more gaming stuff. I'm associated pretty closely with games like D&D, and so everyone knows I love the tabletop stuff. And so I thought it'd be fun to mix those kind of loves together and do a new comic story, and then also do an RPG adventure at the same time. So kind of get the peanut butter and the chocolate together and do it all up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I read Skull Kickers a while back now, and as soon as I saw you post that about it being an RPG book, I was like, yeah, all right, let's do this.
Yeah, we're really having a blast on it. We've got a really great design crew that's been working away on the gaming sections. We got all new artwork that's going to be in there, and it's a really fun adventure. The scope of it has continued to grow even past what I originally thought it would be. I thought it would be more like your old classic kind of D&D module,
Hmm.
but now it's got quite a bit more to it. It's got this wizard's tower and all kinds of stuff like this academy where you're going to the skull kickers sneak into this magic school basically, and not to spoil the story, but obviously they're not magically inclined, and certainly aren't students, and so everything just starts to break down very quickly from there. And it is the type of chaos that I think people expect from the series. It was a ton of fun to get the team back together. Edwin and Misty and Marshall, all of us have been working steadily since the series wrapped up, but all of our skills I think have grown. So it's fun to kind of come back and dig into the material that we know, but also bring some of what we do now, like
Yeah,
the kind of the new quality to it, if you will. Yeah,
no,
yeah,
that
it's
sounds
been nice.
great. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm definitely going
Thanks.
to. Definitely going to run it for my home group, but I'm very tempted to make a stream out of it.
Oh, sweet. That
And
would be amazing. Yeah. One of the things I'm most excited about is when people get their hands on it. I want to see streams. I want to see people adapting and integrating it into their own campaigns, or peppering some of the new magic items and spells and monsters and fun stuff into their adventures. I think that's going to be one of the most enjoyable parts of the whole
yeah,
thing.
uh,
For me, tabletop gaming is all about your ability to customize it to your
no,
needs,
that's
right?
exactly
So,
right. I definitely,
yeah.
if I get it before I finish the season, because I can't remember when it's due to come out, or for the
Right.
next season, I'm definitely
Sure.
going to make some cameos from that into the Shifting Spire.
Awesome. Awesome.
Because
Yeah, it's going to be coming out this summer. I think on the Kickstarter it says June. We're going to be cutting it pretty close.
oh
We
well,
the scope
that'll
of it, like I said,
definitely
keeps
be out.
growing. But
Like that'll be
yeah,
halfway through the season.
right.
Actually, that might be here just in time for the game with Luke.
Nice. Well, I don't want to make promises on it. Like I said, the page count has ballooned even past
Yeah,
what we
I can
originally
imagine.
budgeted, which is cool.
Yeah,
But it's yeah, it's been a real joy to put together. And
yeah.
the new comic story was a ton of fun. And yeah, it's Skull Kickers is obviously near and dear to me, like all my creator owned books are, but because that was sort of my breakout book, and that was sort of the one that put me on the map for most, like kind of mainstream publishers and what may have you. It means a lot to me, and it channels a lot of the stuff that I absolutely love. It's also kind of thematically ties into the book that you and I are going to be talking about today as well, because it's all about killing monsters,
Yeah, yeah,
causing trouble. Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
So I mean, it's a broader kind of a connection point, but it's, there's some similarities there
It is.
in some respects.
And
Yeah.
before we introduce today's book, I do have to say I think my favorite part of Skull Kickers was when we started getting the multiverse bullshit.
Thank you. Yeah, the dimensional stuff. It's so funny now because, with like Into the Spider-Verse and Endgame and all this stuff. Movies about time travel have been, kind of a dime a dozen, but multiple parallel dimensions and stuff was not really the norm, and now it's much more accepted. But at the
Yeah,
time, that was pretty out there,
yeah.
and
It
it's fun
cracked
to
me
be able
up.
to, yeah, be able to do these spins on the characters and mix up visually and mix up thematically. And the whole thing of Skull Kickers was sort of about tearing apart tropes, fantasy tropes and adventure tropes and gaming tropes and all this kind of stuff, and then being able to sort of slice sideways with the dimensional bit made it that much faster and more frenetic. So yeah, it
Yeah,
was a
no.
it was a ton of fun to put
As
together.
soon as that stuff started happening, like I already loved the book, but as soon as that stuff started
Right.
happening, I started laughing out loud a lot more.
Oh, thanks, man. I really appreciate it. Definitely a lot of gaming stuff found its way in there, even though I don't put a lampshade on it. Like, no one's ever rolling dice in the game, and we're not using any terminology from role playing games, but the feeling of things being out of control, like the story's supposed to go this way, but the players are going to do their own thing. That's
Yeah,
always kind of been a quality that I like injecting into the stories that I tell, and particularly Skull Kickers and the Dungeons and Dragons book, because that to me feels like D&D when everyone's kind of seat of their pants, things are falling apart, and how's this all going to turn out,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I know exactly what you mean, and that's it. Like you've been able to, you and Max have really kept that pace with the D&D comics as well. Because
Oh, thank
I
you.
I grew up playing those games. I never got to finish them because I
Right.
only had the demos
Oh,
back in the
they're
day.
so good. Yeah,
But
but the video games are great, and I absolutely love playing them. But there's only so many options, right? At the end of the day, it's still a computer program.
yeah,
When you play with
exactly.
your friends at the table, when you're playing the D&D with your friends, and you've got a group together, there's an infinite number of options and an infinite
Yeah,
number of ways for things to go off the rails, and that's
yeah.
kind of the joy of it to me.
I'm currently working my way through Baldur's Gate 2 because I got the enhanced editions
Nice.
on the old
Oh,
tablet, so I
sweet.
can catch up before
Awesome.
Baldur's Gate 3.
Good stuff. Yeah, I've been playing the early access of 3, for work, of course.
Yeah,
Right, like I just, gotta do research,
yeah.
so
Like
it's been
this,
great.
all this D&D stuff I've got here. That's all
Yeah,
for
it's
work.
all everything here is just
Yeah,
it's all important reference material. That's how I look at it. But yeah, it's been great, seeing what the Larian crew is doing and what they're bringing into the mix. Their love of the property is so strong, and I've been talking with them, and they've been amazing. They're just so passionate about the game and about storytelling and about paying homage to things that have come before, but also putting their own spin on it, which is what we all need to do. Like,
yeah,
when you come into a property and you're working on it, it is nice to, knowing what has come before, the continuity, if you will, matters. But you can't just endlessly recycle. You also have to push things forward, and you have to try and build new stories and add to those areas. Otherwise, it becomes stale, right? So
yeah.
for
No,
me,
very true.
I yeah, I always want to try and be cognizant of what has come before and be aware of it, but not feel trapped by it. You always want to try and make something fresh. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love. I think that my favorite thing I've seen out of the new game so far was that Illithid transmogrification scene.
Oh
That
man,
was
it gets
intense.
so it gets so wild. Yeah, I've played through all the early access stuff, and it gets really cool. There's some great bits in it, and there's still a lot more to develop. Like, the game still has so much more still to do. Like, I'd say, even when you play that early access, that's less than a third of what the total game will be.
Yep.
And even those sections, there's only a limited number of choices, and there's just going to be so much more by the time they're done. So it's cool stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, we can't talk about Baldur's Gate without talking about the Descent.
Right? Yeah. Descent into Avernus is such a special book for Max and I because we both got to work on it. Like I've been doing the D&D comics since 5th edition launched in 2014, and that was a ton of fun. And because my editor at IDW wasn't a role-playing game player, he didn't know all the terminology. He didn't know any of the material. So he was organizing the schedule on the comic, but he wasn't dealing with the canon. Like he wasn't checking stuff over because he doesn't know D&D.
Yeah.
So that got me plugged directly in with Wizards of the Coast, and so we started talking and getting along really well, and that kind of ended up plugging me in directly into the sort of creative system there, where I started doing consulting for them. So I was doing a bunch of behind the scenes stuff, but also more comics, and eventually one of the gents over there, Adam Lee, he's amazing, he's one of the story leads, he got in touch with me about doing what they call a story push for the thing that would eventually be Descent into Avernus. So I went down to the Wizards office for a week, and we hung out and filled a whiteboard with all sorts of weird ideas, and generated all sorts of fun stuff that would end up in that book. And it was just such an amazing experience. And then to have the book come out, and they do these D&D live events, and then I went down to LA and we did all the promotion for it, and that was announcing the book and showing everything off and playing in these live stream games. And it was just such an insane weekend, like one of the best convention weekends, sort of game weekends. It was all that put together, and just complete coincidence, it happened on the weekend of my birthday, so it's like everything was just wild. It was this wild runaway train.
I was crying in Australia watching all those streams.
But we had so much fun. Yeah, it was awesome.
Your stream, of course, with Matt, and B-Dave was in that one as well, wasn't he?
Yep. B-Dave Walters. Yeah, there was a great crew. Amanda Prosser. There was no, we had so much fun, and everyone like just met each other that day. That was the wildest part, is that most of us had never met before, and we just basically met backstage, hung out for a little bit, and then we were out there, doing the stream. It was
I met Amanda amazing. At that PAX that I mentioned, actually, back in 2019.
That's awesome.
And I played with B-Dave last year. Actually, I got to DM for
cool.
Dave.
He's such a good. Yeah, he's amazing. We've played a few times now.
He was an amazing player to run the game for.
Yeah. I have no doubt.
Yeah, it was so much fun. And that stream, your stream, was one of my two favorites of the weekend. Of course, you as Minsk and Matt as Boo.
Right.
And then
that was such a crazy thing too, because when they got in touch with me, and Chris Perkins contacted me and said, we want you to do one of the streams. I said, of course, that'd be great. And he said, I want you to play Minsk. And I joked with him and I said, oh, does this mean I have to shave my head? And he said, will you? And I was like, haha, no. And we sort of went back and forth joking about it. And then he said, well, I've got this wild idea. We're going to have Matt Mercer on the stream. And I said, oh my God, that'd be so amazing. I want him to play the hamster. And I was just like, what? Like, I could not believe it. And so then we were joking back and forth, and Greg Tito, he's head of PR over there, he was on the email thread, and we were going back and forth, and he said, so what's this about Jim shaving his head? And then Matt Mercer's like, he's got to do it. And they just kept sort of joking about it. And I said, I'll do it if we, like put it on the social media or whatever. And Greg's like, done. And so that day, literally in the middle of the afternoon, they shaved my head backstage and did all the makeup for Minsk. And the best part was they did such a good job. The crew that they put together was so awesome. I finished and I sent a selfie to my brother, and my brother was like, oh, cool, a Minsk cosplayer. Like he just didn't realize it was me. Like he just did not pick up on, which was so awesome. And I said, look closer. And then like 2 minutes later, I get the text back and it goes, holy shit. And I was just like, right? So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I was watching all of that coming out on the social media as it was going. I was like, oh, this is going to be good.
Yeah,
and then of course,
so hilarious.
Max pulls out, some Max magic fuckery and just spins out those cartoons on the fly. As
I know, he's so good to be, and like I said, it was a real magical weekend. I don't know that we'll ever be able to reproduce that ever again. It was just such singular, like everyone coming together and everyone in such good spirits, and it was like I said, just one of the best times I've ever had. So,
I can imagine. One day, I hope to make it to a D&D live, but if they ever do one in Australia, you can bet your butt I will do everything I can to get a ticket.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah, I want to do more, international travel. Obviously, the state of the world right now, it hasn't been, I haven't been to a convention since late 2019, which feels surreal. I was going to like 12 to 15 shows a year and then suddenly just nothing. So I'm eager to get back in the saddle once things are safe, and I'm excited to see people again. And the social aspect of this industry, comics and gaming, is so strong, and the
It
people are
really
so
is.
great, and I
Yeah.
miss them terribly. And we'll jump on Zoom calls and we'll touch base and whatever, but it's not the same obviously as being in person. And so I'm really pumped to get back to it once I can.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I totally
for
understand
sure.
that, and you're right. The social aspect of both comics and bloody TTRPGs is crazy. The amount of
Oh
people that
yeah,
I've connected with and have played with slash am working with or had on the show and stuff
yep.
in the last 12 months
Lifelong
just by going,
friendships.
"Hi, I'm doing a thing.
Yep.
You want to do the thing?"
Right, right. No, and so many people are I think discovering the RPG stuff now even during the pandemic. And so I'm really curious to see in the post-pandemic kind of world now the fandom, I think, and the fan base for gaming, like D&D is bigger than ever. I think it's just going to keep growing. I think
Yeah,
people
I
realize
think so too.
how exciting it is, and I hope that just the momentum carries forward, because it's such a joy to be even a small part of it. So
Yeah, and
yeah.
it's been really good this last maybe 6 to 8 months as well. I've been seeing more and more Australian creators sort of
Oh, cool.
getting more
Nice.
more eyes on them, which is great because we've got some amazing
That's
talent
good.
over here, but we're so
Cool.
far from everything. It's really
Sure,
hard.
sure.
I've got some friends who write, supplements and stuff, and their work is
Right.
just insane. It's amazing.
Awesome. That's good. Well, that's the thing now, is that we're not limited by the geography anymore, which is so good. Like, people are putting out great artwork, people are putting out great stories. I work with all kinds of artists. It sounds corny to say all over the world, but literally all over the world. Like Stephen Cummings and I, we did the Wayward book together. He's in Yokohama, in Japan, right? So 13 hours difference, like same as
Yeah,
you or whatever. It's like all those, we're not limited by that stuff anymore. In fact, what ends up happening is I'll send him material, and then I will go to bed, and I wake up and it's like magic, because when I wake up there's pages, there's
yeah.
artwork in my inbox and all that
I
stuff.
know
So
exactly what you mean. Like I'm waiting on my
yeah, it's
first
fun.
artist comps maybe today, and like the
Nice.
the author for that is in Chicago.
Right? It doesn't matter anymore. We're not limited in that way. And so it's really exciting. It's fun to be able to get, I've been getting questions about one of the Avengers stories I did, because it's been published recently in Spanish. And so I've been getting these Spanish readers have been asking me questions about the stories that we did like a year and a half ago. It's like, oh, awesome. Like that's great. The translations and just the ability for people to find this stuff and to discover creators and then to dig into the things. And I like the fact, like, that your show is about creator owned books and about kind of indie stuff, and like No Capes, right? Like the idea that it's more than just superheroes. And I love the superhero stuff, and I love working on that stuff, but there's so many other things out there.
Right,
And
there
so it's
really
just
are.
nice to be able to, I want to, turn people onto that stuff. I know so many people, I think when they think about their friends reading comics, they're like, oh, I want them to read my favorite superhero book. And it's like, no, usually when I'm trying to get people into comics, I'll say, what kind of movies do you like? And then they tell me, and then I plug them into the kind of creator owned books that are closest to those kinds of genres or those kinds of elements. And it's way more successful. It's way
Yeah,
easier at helping to bridge the divide, rather than saying, I mean, the Marvel movies and stuff, it's a little easier than it was before because people know these characters. But the indie stuff's so much more focused, right? Like, here's volume one. This is what you need. Get on board. Try it out. If you
yeah,
like it, follow that author, because that's very much like anyone else. Follow that writer. Follow that artist. It's just like following authors in a prose book. And so it's just easier to kind of get people into that mindset, I think, when
yeah.
I'm trying to hook people on comics.
That is exactly right. And a
Yeah,
lot of the indie stuff is, kind of one and done or short runs, so you don't have
yeah,
to
yeah,
try to catch up on stuff. Like one of my favorites of
exactly.
2020 was this one. And this is it. This is the whole book.
Nice. Oh, cool. Nice. Yeah, it's
But
really great when you just got the one volume, right? Yeah, yeah.
this was awesome.
That's a great little design too. Yeah, so
Yeah.
good.
And this is by one of my buddies who's an
Wicked.
Australian writer as well,
Cool.
Ryan
Nice. That
Lindsay.
looks really nice.
and Chris
Very
Panda
cool.
was on art. And
Nice.
yeah, they worked with Comics Tribe putting that out and came up with the idea for the
Hmm.
die cut cover. And since then, they've
That's
done a
a yeah, good
re-release.
design and a nice book is just, it grabs a lot of attention because if you're going to pay for the physical item, it's like, let's make it a really nice piece.
Exactly,
Absolutely.
it's exactly right.
Sweet. All
They
right.
did
So
a
what are we
Wailing Blade
talking
cover.
about today?
Yeah, we're talking
What's
about.
that?
They did a Wailing
Yeah.
Blade version with the die cut
Oh,
cover like
cool.
that just a couple of months ago too, which is cool.
Awesome. Very cool. Very
Yeah,
cool. Yeah, yeah. Wailing Blade's great, and Rich Duzik's great. He's doing all sorts of good stuff now.
yeah. Rich
I'm
might be
really
coming on the
proud of
show
that guy.
later in the season, actually.
Oh, cool. Yeah, he's a really good dude. We've hung out a bunch, and watching him slowly get traction and finally getting out in front of people the way I knew he would. It's just been nice. It's been exciting to see his career growing as well.
Yeah,
Very
it's really
cool.
good. I'm actually I backed I'm not sure if you saw it on Kickstarter late last year, the Colorpedia by Renderwave. And
Oh no, I didn't see that.
yeah, it's like a book for colorists to learn all
Oh, cool.
the like
Nice.
a comics focused coloring
Right.
sort of thing rather than
Cool.
painting and this, that, and the other.
Right. Right.
Um,
Right.
and one of the parts of the digital rewards was a copy of Wailing Blade #1, just the inks,
Nice.
so that we can practice
Oh,
coloring on it.
cool. Yeah, yeah, that's smart. That's really smart. And I think it's really important to see pro work up close. One of the things I love doing when I go to conventions is I would go to the original art dealers and I would just want to see the actual artwork because I think you appreciate that much more the amount of work that goes into it and how detailed the pages are or how much, how in depth the storytelling is as well.
Yeah,
It's
exactly
always nice
that.
to see the stuff high res. Sweet.
Yeah, I always try to make an effort to go. Like most of my time is spent in Artist Alley and the comics guests area at conventions here.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Obviously, like I love Artist Alley. I love being there, but I also love seeing friends and discovering people. Like just wandering around and then going, I have never seen this person's work before, and now I'm super excited just to find out more about what they're doing and where they are, and being surprised because sometimes they're local to that show, and sometimes they're from who knows where,
Yeah,
and
no, exactly.
yeah,
I'm
it's
just
so
glad
cool.
we've got a few hometown heroes that come to every show, so I always get to see their
Right.
cool stuff, like Nicola Scott and Tom Taylor, uh,
Yep.
often at my local convention, which is great.
Awesome. That's great. Very cool. Yeah, Tom Taylor's great. He was at the last convention that I did. My last convention was October 2019, and that was Paris Comic Con, and he was there. We got to hang out. He's such a good dude.
Yeah, I really like
Good,
Tom.
good, good
We've
people.
talked a
Yeah.
lot. I built him a lightsaber a couple of years ago, actually.
Oh, hilarious. That's awesome.
Yeah, I used to do a lot of costuming and prop making and stuff. Like I built these ones behind me, so I built one for Tom because
Nice.
he used to. I'm not sure if you've seen his stories. He used to be a juggler before he worked in comics.
Yes, yes, yeah. He's hilarious. He'll talk just randomly start talking about stuff, and he'll be like, "Oh yeah, when I ate fire," and you're just like, "What is this?" And he'll just tell you weird stories of things. He's got a really frenetic background. It's awesome. I think
Yeah,
that kind of variety always helps when you're trying to be a writer. Just having all these different experiences and
yeah.
having met people from all over the place
That
for
is
sure.
one of the things I love about most of the Australian comics creators is that if they're an Australian that has chosen to go into comics, chances
Right.
are they've got some weird fucking stories.
Awesome. That's great. Like I said, it all feeds its way into the storytelling. It all feeds its way into the writing, one way or another, for sure.
Exactly.
So,
And as you mentioned,
yeah.
we do have a comic we're talking about today, so I will stop distracting
Yes.
us both. We're talking about Something is Killing the Children by James
Yes.
Tynion, Werther,
Hmm.
Dell'Edera, and Miquel Muerto. And it's a
Yes.
friggin' good book.
It is great. Yeah, super impressed with the series, and it's been so consistent. The artwork's consistent, the storytelling is really consistent, and you can tell it's a passion project. I mean, almost every creator-owned book is, unless someone is trying to cheaply cash in on a trend. The vast majority of these creator-owned books are the subject matter, the genre, the characters. These are things that these creators have always wanted to tell, have always wanted to do, and it taps into something really primal. Watching James' career explode has been a joy. I met him originally. He was a student in one of Scott Snyder's writing classes,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and Scott asked me to do like a live stream kind of Q&A because about indie comics and about self-publishing and things like that. And so I was, he was one of the students there asking questions or whatnot. And then a few months later, I was at a convention and he introduced himself to me and said he was just getting his start, doing books now that he had finished Scott's class. And just, he's been so consistent. He's been so sharp. And he's the kind of person who is organized and excited and just picks up on the form and understands the potential of it, and comics is such an amazing medium, and he just tapped right into it and has done such fantastic work, which is why he's doing top tier commercial work like Batman, but also you see that same quality in his creator owned stuff,
Yeah.
and
No.
Werther's artwork is so good and so evocative and so atmospheric. I love the colors from Miquel, that the book has just got this look and it knows what it is. Like sometimes I'll see an indie book and it feels like the first 3 or 4 issues are getting up to speed, like they're figuring out what the book is or what they want it to be.
Yeah.
And I never got that feeling here. The very first issue explodes out on the page. It's atmospheric, it's exciting, it's got this wonderful mystery that it's unraveling, and it does it in a way that feels really elegant and natural. Yeah, it just impressed me on so many different levels.
No,
And
I agree
it felt like
completely. Exactly
yeah,
as you
a
said, like
confident voice.
from
Yeah.
page one, I was like,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
these people are telling a story. They're not
Yeah.
figuring a
And
story out. They're
right. And that's like, I've seen books that meander and they still hit the mark, but this just feels like a really tight thought process on it, which is always nice to see. The other thing too that impressed me a lot, whenever I see a book that has a mystery, um, there's a lot of tricks that writers can use to dole out clues, and
yeah,
one of the most hokey and terrible ones that writers will do is they will have characters talk around secrets. So if you and I are supposed to be privately having a conversation about something secret, we would not hold back on any of those secrets. We would
yeah,
think that we were in a safe place, but they'll have characters talk in this very obtuse way, or they'll, as Bob, blah blah blah, and then they'll say something really obvious, or they won't use the name of something even though they totally would. And what amazed me was all the mysteries roll out in a really cool fashion, but no one ever feels like they're not being natural. No one ever feels like they're not in character.
yeah,
Like everyone talks confidently. Everyone says stuff at the moment that it made sense for them to say it for the first time. And every issue's got these little nuggets of info if you're paying attention. Little, the very first time they talk about the Order of St. George or something, it came up on the phone as the main character Erica is receiving a phone call from St. George. What is that? We don't know. Later on, they use the term, but they use it in a real natural fashion. You know what I mean?
yeah. No,
Or they'll
exactly
talk
that.
about her being astray, or they'll tease little bits of her past in a conversation that feels like the right time for that to naturally come up, instead of it being forced down our throats, or the story being sort of wrenched to the side to make room for it. And that takes real quality. Like you can't, it's hard to explain to people. I think sometimes, like, when one of the things I love about being a comic creator is when you see someone do it so well, how hard that is. And when they make it look easy, you're like, damn, not only is that great, but you made it look like it was no big deal. And that impresses me,
Yeah, yeah.
on
There's
so many
been a few
levels.
books over the last year or so that I've read, and I've been like, I see what you did there, and
Yeah.
I
And I'm loving it.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
loving it, but I'm kind of mad that you did it.
Right. Because you do it so well. Yeah. Um, I think Werther's artwork is a real revelation in that way too, because it's, on the surface, I think you could say it's simple. Like it doesn't have a lot of dense detail, and it doesn't have a lot of hatching or the kind of like niggly, little bits that you would put into line work on certain kinds of styles. And yet it never feels like it's not full. Like it always
No,
has enough there. The emotion is always really clear. The expression and the structure is really good. The angles are really smart. um I'm surprised too, they do this thing where almost every issue, if not every issue, they'll have a 2-page spread or a couple 2-page spreads of dense paneling, so like 12 to 14 panels spread
Yeah.
across 2 pages, and that's an unusual storytelling bit, and I'm not normally a big fan of it because I'm like, oh, it can be a pain to track across the page. But because the paneling's so strong and the panel to panel storytelling so good, it just effortlessly reads across. And you're like, that's how it goes. Like if you've got someone confident at the wheel doing the artwork, they're going to solve those problems. They're going to solve them in ways that make it feel elegant, and
Yeah.
you could tell everyone's in sync in terms of what they want to do with it as well, which is cool.
No,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
agree completely with that. Like Werther's work, I've got the page. I think it's the second page where they start to tell the scary story,
right.
and like you said, there's not an insane amount of hatching and
No, there's not a lot of detail, but it never feels, like I said, like it's empty, and it never
exactly
feels
with
like you're getting less than what you need. Yeah.
yeah, and combined with Miquel's colors here, it
Mm-hmm,
it
mm-hmm.
really does feel like one of those stupid sleepovers with a bunch of boys trying to show each other
Yep,
how tough they are. Ooh, all
yep,
the lights
yep.
are off. We're big boys who aren't scared of anything, and you can
Yeah, it's
feel
great.
the energy while they're doing this bullshit on the page.
Well, what's amazing about it is, first issues are hard because you're trying to simultaneously world build and you're trying to hook the reader, and you want to give enough but not too much. You don't want to get too expository and all that kind of stuff. And there's just enough going on there, and the small town murder and all that kind of stuff is very, we've seen it a lot. We've seen it in TV, we've seen it in movies, we've seen it in books and comics, and yet there's such confidence in the way they're delivering on it, and the payoff of that first issue is so solid. You're just like, yep, all right, I'm in. Monster Hunters, this is going to be awesome. This is going to be fun. And there's nice iconography, like iconography where Erica's got this really cool look. Like she is
Yeah.
eye-catching and interesting, but not like overblown.
Mm-hmm.
There's just smart design all the way through the
Yeah.
thing.
She's
And
iconic but not distracting.
yeah, yeah, and I think Boom has put out a bunch of creator-owned books in the last couple of years that have turned heads, and I think they've turned heads also in the industry where, not to say anything against books that came before, Something Is Killing the Children, but I think that book kind of put a mark down that said we are doing really high quality creator-owned stuff, and
Yeah.
we are giving the creators the ability to deliver something, their vision on the page, and it's going to be unfiltered and awesome. And I feel like that kind of opened a gate up for a bunch of people who said, oh man, I think I want to get a book over at Boom. And I've just seen so much good stuff coming from them. Like last year felt like a banner year for them, like in a maturing of their publishing line in terms of their commercial stuff, but also really honestly their creator-owned stuff. And that is always exciting to see, because if there are more outlets doing great books and there are more great books out in the industry, then we all benefit. All ships rise on this
Yeah,
stuff.
that's exactly
And
it.
so I want Image to be strong. I want Black Label to be strong. I want IDW and Boom and everybody else, like Dark Horse. I want everyone putting out awesome creator-owned books, because that benefits all of us. It gives us more opportunities as creators, and it also gives us so much more inspiration. Like I'm always kind of keeping an eye out for what's the new cool thing, or what's coming up, or hey, I've never even heard of this person before. How did I miss them? This is so awesome.
Yeah.
And that's just yeah, I feel like Something Is Killing the Children is like James and the crew's statement in terms of like, look, creator owned is very much at the heart of what I do. And even though the guy's writing Batman, even though the guy's creating a bunch of new stuff at DC, it never feels like this is taking a back seat. You know what I
Right?
mean?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and yeah, even speaking of Batman at DC, like we've got Derek Robertson over there doing his little written
Yep.
and illustrated mini run on Batman right
Yep.
now, and it's
Yep.
great.
Yeah, no, that DC's doing some really smart moves. I feel like, but I feel like Marvel's doing well too. Like, there's a lot of great books coming out right now, and it's an
They've
exciting time to be in the mix because you feel like, man, I'm part of this wave of fun stuff that's on the go, and we don't, the COVID kind of impact on the industry. There was a few months there where I think we were worried that it was going to spiral out and really really rupture the monthly comic business. And now we've kind of come out the other side, and people are feeling a lot more optimistic and a lot more excited about the
yeah,
future. Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah. It's been interesting, but there's been so many developments over this time that have really, I think, improved the industry for the better.
mhm. I think I will in the long run, distribution and stuff like that. But the good thing is that inadvertently, people having to slow down and being at home, I think people have found other hobbies. And one of those hobbies has been comics. Another hobby has been tabletop RPGs, but more digital play than at the table with
Yep.
each other. But I think that on the whole, fandom is going to benefit from that in the long
No, I
run. That
agree
we're all
completely.
going to be
And
kind of desperate for some social contact when it's all over with. And I'm pumped for the con season to come back. So
yeah, everyone's going to have
yeah.
so much to talk about when we do finally get to see each other again. It's just like you said, like last year was, despite everything that was chaos, last year
Mm,
was an incredible year for creator owned books. So
yes, yeah,
many
really
amazing
really sharp
books.
stuff. Yeah,
I
yeah,
backed way too many
so many
friggin'
solid
things on
ones.
Kickstarter.
Well, and that's the other thing too. It used to be that those barriers, that if you didn't have a deal at a publisher, you weren't going to get your stuff out there to a wider audience. And platforms like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, all these um, crowdfunding platforms and stuff now, it democratizes more of the process, where people can say, look at what we're capable of, and you're like, I don't care if I've never heard of you before, this is awesome, I'll throw
Exactly.
some money your way.
Yeah,
And that just was not possible even a handful of years ago.
yeah, no, exactly. Even Kickstarter was rough as guts like 4 years ago.
But it's also, there were web comics and stuff right in the late 90s early 2000s, but the idea of that was content online that people were taking in, but not necessarily the kind of direct support that we see now. Not
Yeah,
the kind of, get your money out and let's do this. Some people would have a tip jar and you'd PayPal them a couple bucks, or they would release a T-shirt, or they would occasionally do a print book. But now, because of something like Kickstarter and these other platforms, Patreon, your ability to say, this is what I'm doing all the time, and you can support this directly, constantly, is so much more motivating and exciting, I think, for creators, and gives them the space to grow. Because as much as we as creators want to be high quality right out of the gate, that's not how this goes. You have to build stuff. You have to learn. No matter how much someone teaches you, or what someone tells you, or how many books you read, you have to put pen to paper or the equivalent thereof, and make something, and make those mistakes, and then go, oh right, that's what they meant.
yeah,
Now I'm going to internalize that and build from it and
yeah,
grow before you're able to get that quality to really, that growth period has to happen, right? And
exactly.
now
Like,
people can do it in a much more refined manner,
yeah,
which
no,
is cool.
you hit it on the head because like I learned that lesson luckily very early on because I've got a book that is my ideal thing that I want to write eventually.
Right.
But I started sort of messing around with a bit of world building, wrote a couple of rough
Yeah.
chapters, and was like, I need to do some smaller projects before I do this. This is
Yeah, I think a lot of people want to come out of the gate with their epic, and you're like, you're not the creator you need to be to create that. Like, a
exactly,
lot of times I'll tell people, get your start, do short stories and anthologies. If it's tabletop RPGs, do a short adventure, do a one-off, do a little simple stuff to get up to speed and to learn the process. Because it's like, if you wanted to do exercise, or you wanted to run a marathon, and your first step was, I'm going to buy $200 shoes, and then I'm going to run 15 kilometers, and you're like, yeah, that's not how this works. You got to build up to that. You got to train. You got to get a feel for how these things work. You got to build up your stamina. You got to understand yourself, and your body. And the same thing is true of creative projects as well. You've got
yeah,
to and in many cases, unless you're the auteur who's able to write and draw and color and letter, you're going to be working with other people, and you need to know how that relationship works. You know what I mean? Like, I would rather do a short story with someone and figure it out and go, okay, we did 10 pages together. Was that excruciating? Okay, we don't have to keep doing this. Like, we finished it. Good job. But now let's all walk away before we, lose our minds, right? Because different people have different working processes.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, dating before marriage, like whatever you want to, analogy you want to use. I've got people that I love working with that I've worked with on multiple projects, Steve Cummings or Max Dunbar, Tamara Bonvillain on colors, like people that
Oh,
I
Tamara's
know
colors are
what
fantastic.
the best, right? I know what they're capable of. I know they can deliver, and we get along really well, and we understand each other, right? But all of those started off as the smaller projects, the little things first, and then you build up to, all right, this is great. Let's do the marathon. Let's really make something, long term.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know, getting back to something as Conan the Children, I don't know how James, met Werther and Miquel, like if that was put together by Boom or if he brought the team or whatever. I'd be really curious to hear from him about that, because the confidence that they showcase in those first few issues, it feels like a well-oiled machine, man. Like, it's
It does.
like,
They feel so
yeah,
well
in sync.
Why you gotta do me
Yeah.
like this, Comixology? It decided to log out as I'm turning the page.
Oops. Well, sometimes it happens.
Yeah.
Technology we can't control. But yeah, it feels like, and maybe, I don't know, maybe they've done some short story stuff before this. I gotta ask James. I'll be like, hey dude, I was talking about your book. I need to know how you pulled the team together. I don't want to steal them. I'm just really curious what what you're up to with it, like how that came together, because it does feel like a very refined kind of approach, and yeah, it all
it
works.
does. It feels really smooth. It feels really tight. It feels like
Yeah.
they went in knowing how to work with each other.
Yeah, and there's now 15 issues out, 3 arcs, and they're complete and they're super solid, and each one ends in a very satisfying way that builds on the previous one. Each one is raising the stakes, but it never feels like you're getting wrenched around. And I never quite know where it's going to go, but when it happens, the best kind of storytelling, I try and explain this to my students and when I'm talking in general, you want to create a surprise in the story, but the minute it happens, the reader is like, well, I wouldn't have wanted it to go any other way. Like,
yeah,
I didn't see that coming, but now that it happened, that is the only way. That is what works best. That is so cool,
yeah. I've read a few books like that where I was like, holy shit, and I'm like, yeah, no, that's exactly right.
No, that's exactly right. Exactly. And what's been fun about it is because James is so good at doling out those little nuggets, those little secrets, and adding to the mythology of the Order of St. George and the black masks and the white masks, and like all these little bits that are just coming out in the dialogue or coming out in the reveal. Something as simple as cutting away to the House of Slaughter in Chicago, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is based in America. Oh, this is interesting. Like, this is, I wasn't sure, is this some global thing, is this some European thing? I don't know. Maybe. And then they, those kinds of things that they're able to sort of pull out just those pieces and go, now a little bit more, now a little bit more, and you're eager to sort of dig under the surface and understand it, but you don't want it to be just info dump, which is cool. Yeah.
No, and like the bright sections as well with the colors, and also not to forget Andwell Design's lettering as well.
Right. And good lettering is absolutely one of those things that everyone takes for granted. Like, you never notice lettering until it doesn't work. And then all of a sudden you're like, what order am I supposed to be reading these panels in? Who is talking? And then bad lettering always stands out. And good lettering, I think, becomes invisible to the reader.
Yeah, so that's how I feel as well. I've always said that, if it's a good job, you don't notice why it's a good job.
You're too busy enjoying the page.
It pulls you in. It's part of the immersion. And then maybe the second read, you will notice it.
Right. As a pro, it's funny because I will see lettering and I get like super excited when it's really well done because I'm like, oh, that's great page flow. Oh, that's really smart. Oh, they did this little trick to make you think thing or whatever. That's a good font choice, like that's
Yep.
very readable, but also mysterious or interesting or has a bit of crackling atmosphere or something.
Yeah.
And I can get really nitpicky about lettering proofs. And so I have the same letterer so far on all my creator-owned stuff. Marshall Dillon letters everything. I've known him for years. He knows all my little what do you want to call it? The way I like to work. He knows all my tricks, all the things that make a book read the way I like it.
Hmm.
And we've just got this great working process now. And then, depending on the Marvel book or, IDW, wherever I'm at, you're getting those letter proofs. And I'm always sort of, most of the letterers are awesome, but it's this fascinating thing where I realize, oh, okay, this is how they kind of break this stuff down, or this is their way of moving through a page. And you learn stuff about the team and about how best, hopefully, to utilize what we do well. And the same thing is true, obviously, of the art team. Like, the more you work with a creative team, you see where they sprint and you see where they slow down and where they struggle, and you're like, okay, these are the types of scenes that you really love. I got to make sure that we really turn that up and make the most of what you're capable of.
Yeah.
I think people assume that the writer just writes a script and then magically it's going to be exactly what I imagined, but it's not. The art team has such a good artist can make a mediocre script fantastic,
Hmm.
and a bad artist can make the greatest story sludge.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
they can
I've
just
seen.
destroy it.
Yeah, I've said that as
Yeah.
well. It doesn't matter how good your writing is. If you
Yeah.
don't have the right art for the story, it's not going to
Yep.
work.
Yep. If it
And
doesn't fit the atmosphere, if the storytelling's not clear, all that stuff,
yep.
design, you name it.
And the
Yeah.
same deal. If you have a really great artist,
Mm-hmm.
an average story can actually still be something really
Well, it
enjoyable.
elevates it because it makes it feel larger, or it feels more emotionally engaging, or all that stuff.
Yeah,
When you
and
get a good artist on one of your stories, it's the best damn feeling, because you're like, I want to live up to that art. I want to deliver something that makes you as the artist happy, that makes readers happy. Like, Corey Smith is drawing Conan the Barbarian. I'm writing Conan monthly at Marvel, and Corey's stuff feels like classic Conan, but he's not trying to ape some of the classic artists. He's doing
yeah,
his own thing, but it's got that gravitas and it's got that weight and it's got that intensity to it. And so I want to write stuff that makes him, pour it all out, that makes him bust his ass and do awesome pages that we can both be really, really proud of. And so, yeah, I think you can tell when an art team is having fun and when they're like kind of flexing and doing it right.
yeah. No, I get
Yeah.
that completely. Like, I really want to work with Frankie again because I did a single page for this anthology with him last
Cool.
year, and it was great. His script was really clear. It was only the one page, but the script was really
Mhm.
clear. I bashed together my layout and sent it to him. He's like, "Perfect. That's exactly the energy I want. Let's do this." And
Awesome.
I had a great time. It was a challenge. It really pushed me outside of my comfort zone and
Right.
was stuff that I hadn't done yet because as much as I love doing comics worth, I'd gotten sidetracked for years and hadn't done sequentials for
Right.
so long before that project.
And it takes a lot of concentration. Again,
Mm,
I think when you see artists who do it well, you don't realize how much work goes into a great page. And then as an artist, you're like, oh, I see a lot of illustrators and they're very competent artists, but just straight drawing is different from composing a page.
it
Storytelling is its own skill set.
it very much is,
And
and that's why I'm doing a
yeah,
bunch of mini practice sequentials at the moment so that I can
right?
actually start doing some real stuff.
Right. And it makes a huge difference because that development period, again, even if a bunch of that doesn't make it into the final page, you will grow from it. You will really benefit from the experience of it.
Yeah,
Getting back to the book we were talking
yeah.
about, I had never seen Werther's artwork before. I'm
Me neither.
curious now what other things like they've done and what other books they've worked on, because it doesn't feel like a first book. It doesn't feel like a first project, you
No,
know.
it really doesn't. I mean, I'm looking at the page right now where we first see Erica when she comes out
Right?
of the woods covered in blood with those two machetes.
So good.
You know,
Iconic stuff too.
frantic
Yeah.
eyes just looking at this little girl.
One of the things that can be tough when you're pacing out a book is deciding where those full page, splashes are, because you want them to be impactful. But the 90s cliche of like full page splashes every 4 or 5 pages, like just overdoing them, like for the sake of pinups or for the sake of whatever. It's like you got to kind of hold your fire and then really deliver it on those biggest moments and make them impactful and awesome. And James is really good at that. I noticed that
Yeah,
in Batman. I noticed that here. He like holds it and then just like that's the spot. That's the one. That's the page turn where we need that sucker. And it's a unique thing to comics. I mean, in movies there's editing and everything else, but in comics you have the power of the page turn, your ability to flip to a big moment, to reveal some impactful and amazing and surprising thing.
mm-hmm.
And the people who know how to do that well, there's a rhythm to it. That's like a quality of storytelling that it can be, when it's done well, like we said before, you just take it for granted. But
Yeah,
when it's done poorly, you're like, why is this such a jangly mess of pacing? Why is this all over the place?
yeah.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
it's
it's
exactly
super
right.
solid.
I I'm seeing that like the first one of those double page spreads that you were talking about with just a shit
Yeah,
ton of panels.
just
But
littered with panels, and that is so not my jam. Like, I would not generally write one of those, and I would not expect an artist to do one of those. And yet the first one like threw me. I was like, oh, we're doing that, okay. And then it became a thing. They do it almost every issue, if not every issue, sometimes multiple times in the issue. But once you get used to it, and once you realize how clean it is across the page, it's like, yep, that's just how they do it in this book, and good
yeah,
on them.
yeah. Like I'm loving it. I'm looking at it now and
Yeah.
I'm not confused by it.
No,
I
no.
really like the way they lay out the panels in the first row by
Mm-hmm.
having the little girl's panel go past the halfway mark of the page.
Exactly, because that's what you need. Because you need to make it absolutely clear that we are on a two-page spread. Because what you
Yeah,
don't want to do is have someone read across, jump to the next row, and go, "What?" and then track back and then go, "Oh, I'm supposed to read it in this order."
yeah.
I see
And
that all the time. I see it all
yep.
the time on bad two-page spreads.
Yeah,
And
I've been
and
confused
even
by
though
many.
even though I always figure it out. There's always that moment of, now I'm rereading, and I feel
Mhm.
like I have it's like a record scratch, like it pulled
Yeah.
me out of the music,
Oh yeah, no, it
and I
completely
got
is,
to dial it
especially
back. And yeah.
yeah, especially for someone like me with ADHD who has to reread a page multiple times half the time anyway.
Right.
Trying to focus on that and then realizing that the page that you're
Sure.
rereading 3 times is only
Is
half
out
of
of
what you're
order.
supposed to be paying attention
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
Whereas this
Yeah,
one panel
absolutely.
on this page sets that up for a smooth
Yep.
read immediately.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes you over the line, so now you know the format. It's just smart. It's just good storytelling. I'm curious if that was in the original layouts, or was that something that the editor called out and made sure of. Whatever it is, they made it work, and then they've got a system. And that's what you need.
Yeah.
And it's one of those readability things that, again, I think a lot of people take for granted. They're
Yep.
just
And
like,
it's
oh, two-page spread, this is how it goes. You're like, until it's done really badly.
yep.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like that's a really simple thing. Just, that one box reaching
Mm-hmm.
past the middle of the
Mm-hmm.
page
Yep.
seems like nothing. But if that wasn't like that, I would read down.
No, it would just turn into a jangling mess. So, it's smart stuff. The whole book is really, really enjoyable. And going back through it to read it for this, because I knew obviously we are going to be talking about it on this episode, gave me the chance to read all 15 in one sitting. And that was really enjoyable because I had been reading it in sort of bursts. I'd read
Yep.
2 or 3
It was
issues
the
at a
same with
time.
me originally.
And that's just the nature of a lot of the books I read right now, because I'm always reading stuff for research, and then I'm reading stuff for reference. Like I get sent almost every Marvel book in PDF so that we can keep up with continuity.
Yeah.
And so I'm reading, 40 Marvel issues, and I'm reading indie books from my friends, and I'm reading, and you're like, sort of this, sensory overload of books. And so I'll start reading an indie book, and I'm like, oh yeah, right, this is where we were at, 3 months ago or whatever.
Yeah.
But being able to just sit down and go, all right, what I'm doing reading for the next few hours is this, and just sort of lavish every moment on it and see those connection points. And that's where I really started to appreciate also their ability to drop those nuggets of information that you drop a little piece here, and then 2 issues later they would pick up on it, and you're like, that's good stuff. Like, that's really tight, thoughtful, world building,
Yeah.
and doling out the mysteries but not making them annoying. Everyone feels confident and capable. They're not revealing stuff because people are stupid, and they're not revealing stuff because people are talking around the secrets. And those are two of my pet peeves, where you're like, the only way for this to work is for half the cast to spontaneously become idiots. And I'm like, no, you've just kicked me out of the story.
Yeah.
And that never happens here. Yeah.
Robin and I, my partner Robin and I, have that problem with a lot of TV, and I end up having that problem with a lot of comics, where so many of the mysteries and mistakes and accidents and issues that are the story could have been solved with a text message.
Right. And it's characters being dumb rather than. What I love is when everyone can be smart and the tension is still there.
Yes.
Where it's like, oh, these people, if they tell them, then this is just going to get so much worse. And then they tell them, and you're like, oh no. The easy thing would have been to have them not, but now you've really pulled it out. Like,
right.
That's the kind of stuff that's so cool. They do that multiple times here in Something's Killing the Children, where they'll set up a moment where in any other horror movie or story, someone would say nothing, and then they just say what needs to be said, even if it's going to cause more damage, even if it's going to get more difficult. And you're like, okay, that's kind of awesome. I
love that, because when it's a case of somebody doesn't communicate with another character for no purpose other than this is what I need to happen to make my story go.
This is the only way the story can function. You're like, nope, I don't believe it. And here it's like everyone's making hard decisions. Everyone's doing what they would do. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of nice. I like also the fact that the adult characters, like, yes, this is a story about, kids, teens, whatever. But the typical thing to do is to make all the adults either idiots or make them they will never believe the kids, because it's got a horror supernatural aspect. So they're like, I don't believe you, you're lying to me or whatever. And there's a little bit of that where it's natural. And then once there's evidence of something more, most of those characters do the natural thing. And they're like, I'm scared. I don't know what's happening. And you're like, that's totally reasonable. But what they're not doing is just putting on the blinders and being like an idiot. Your classic horror movie adult where they're like, I'm not listening to another word you say, and they just, that kind of garbage to keep the plot going. And it's like, nope. The adults, dig in, and they want to save people, and they want to figure out what's going on. And when they realize that the stakes are higher than they can possibly understand, they're stressed and upset and freaking out, but they're also at some point willing to say, I don't know what's happening. You have to help me. Or, okay, prove to me that this can make some sense, or that's just feels like more mature storytelling.
No, I agree.
And in a nice way to sidestep a lot of the hokey tropes that have worn out their welcome in kind of a supernatural or a horror genre. So yeah,
and that's exactly it. It's like having the adults not just ignore the kids and
right.
Like, oh no, you're just making everything up. I'm not going to listen to you.
Exactly. Like they say that at a certain point at the start because they don't have enough evidence. But once it gets, people are dying.
Yeah.
It's no longer a game. No one's treating this like it's a silly little thing. Everyone is heightened in their intensity in the right kind of ways. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Exactly.
And the sheriff and everyone else, they don't act like, they're not bullheaded in an annoying way. Like they don't just sit there and say, all right, everyone, is going to follow this by the book because I'm a sheriff and therefore I'm the law. And you're like,
Right?
ugh, I've seen this bullshit so many times in so many bad movies.
Exactly. No, at
And
some
here
point,
it's like, no, yeah,
yeah,
these are real people who act like real people, which is
exactly.
great.
Yeah, at some point they
Yeah,
realize, okay, no, weird shit is happening. I'm out of my
yeah,
depth
it's way
here.
exactly. When Erica makes a deal with the sheriff and she basically says, "You're not going to understand this. You never will. But if you let me leave, those kids are not going to die anymore, and this problem goes away." And he stops, and you're sitting there thinking, "Oh, he's going to lock her up, or they're going to get in a fight," and he just goes, "Okay, get out of here." Like I was like, "What? Awesome. Okay, that
Yeah,
is nice
yeah,
to
I
see."
loved it. It's like,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
he's like, right, yeah, you're probably right. I don't get what's going on
I
here,
don't go ton,
but
and
you
we don't have
seem to know
time.
more than me.
Right, right.
Like,
And she can prove that she's not the one doing it, so
yeah,
they don't have that annoying thing of, I bet it's you. Like they sidestep all those cliches and they just get on to, let's get the action and the intensity going. Yeah, it's great. It's good
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. No, it's
Yeah, and,
it's
and
such a good
and
book.
the best compliment I can give is when you read a book and you finish an issue and you're like, damn, I gotta up my game. I gotta do better.
Yeah,
I gotta make cool stuff. Those are
yep,
the best kinds of inspirations. Yeah.
yeah. No, and that's
So
exactly it.
what I'm trying to say is, for all of you watching or listening here, if you haven't read Something is Killing the Children, you are friggin' missing out.
Yeah, go
Like
read it.
yeah, it's a little indie gem. I wouldn't even say it's that little. I'd say it's one of Boom's strongest books. It's one of Creator Own kind of strongest books going right now. It's super consistent. It's super easy to dig into. It doesn't feel yeah, it's very inviting, it's very engaging, and it's got enough of the kind of, yes, it's a bit of a horror movie, and yes, it's kind of, kids versus the supernatural, but it does it in such an elegant, cool way, and it never talks down to you.
Yeah, yeah,
um
and,
you
and
know
you're right. It's got a bit of that kids on bikes vibe.
yeah,
But
but
it's
it
got a bit
doesn't
of
it
almost a Van Helsing vibe.
right, it doesn't just lean in on its influences hard. It sort of peppers them in real
Mm-hmm.
nice and elegantly.
Yeah, it's a
It's
nice
got the
blend.
Yeah, and it's got your secret cults and your, all these other kinds of things, but none of them feel like they're eating up too much of the page count or getting in the way of the heart and the emotional content of the story. And James, the main character, he is relatable and interesting and never the annoying kid. He's engaged and wants to be a part of this and wants to purge this evil, but he doesn't just feel like the snot-nosed kid, traipsing along. Um, there's a pathos to him that feels very real and very intense that
Yeah.
works incredibly well. And the deeper you go and the more you understand how intrinsic he is to what's going on, I don't want to spoil anything. I feel like the richer he gets as well.
Oh
And
yeah.
I'm excited, you know, to see if they're going to I can't say more than that because I don't want to spoil anything. So it's
Yeah,
it's well worth checking out.
it is.
And
And like even if you can't
yeah,
find a physical copy in your local comic shops, it's $3 on Comixology right now. The link is in the chat. The link will
awesome.
be in the description if you're watching this on YouTube. So
Yeah,
hit that, go grab it. I mean, right now the first volume is on sale for like $12. I think it's 11.99 or something.
that's great. That's so worth it. It's the kind of book that I would totally, it's the kind of book you could give a new reader and they would just dive right in and be like, "Why haven't I been reading these graphic novels?" Like it's very inviting, it's very engaging, and it's classic comics in the sense that it's not trying to do anything wild and experimental where you'd be like, I don't know how to read a page, but it's confident and modern enough that it also doesn't feel like, like kid stuff by any means.
Yeah, no,
It's
exactly
just
that.
it's great. It's great creator owned book. And when I saw it on your list of possible books to talk about, I was like, yep, that's the one I really want to dig in on
Yeah, I
because
was I was really
um
torn about both of the books that you chose, but I
right.
had been wanting to talk about this one for a while.
Oh, good. Good.
And
Yeah, no, seriously, James is on such a rocket ride right now with his career. And I think it's really easy to just look and go, oh, the Batman guy. And it's like, you know what? Obviously, Batman's a great book, and I'm glad he's helming it. But I think the most exciting stuff he's doing is in the creator owned
you
space.
know what, creator own is where I first discovered James, and then I was
Oh,
interested
really?
in the superhero stuff because I'm like, oh, cool, I've read this guy's stories
Right.
that are his stories.
Right. And even like Memetic, who I think we did before this, and oh, Backstagers, I think it's called, was
Mm-hmm.
pretty fun. But Department of Truth feels like this absolutely, like, this is a guy who knows exactly what he wants. Like, he has got a great idea, and he is going to deliver it, in spades. And that is
Yeah,
what you need to see. You need to see creators with a really good voice, creators with really strong ideas, and the ability to carry it over the finish line.
yeah,
And he is where he is right now because he's able to do that, and he's able to mobilize great art teams. He's able to build really great stories and play to their strengths. And not everyone, like, I've seen great writers, but people who can helm to all kinds of different books in both a superhero space and a creator owned space, in a dramatic space and in fun kind of all ages material. And he's covered just an amazing array of titles. And it bodes very well for where he's at and where he's going to be, in
yeah.
the future.
That's
So
exactly it, and it's been a good year even for superhero comics in the fact that like people like James and other
yep.
indie creators whose books I've read for the last couple of years, and I see them publicly speaking about how much they love certain characters, and then they're
Right.
getting a chance to write those characters. I'm reading those books by these indie writers finally getting a shot,
Yep.
and I'm just like, yes, give me more of
But
this.
that's
This
the
is
thing, is that, if you've got someone with a really powerful voice and a confidence, you want them to come on to these commercial properties and bring that spark with them. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
and the smartest thing you can do is to pour them into those areas where they're most excited, and let them, generate new stuff
yeah,
while
exactly.
never closing them off from creator own. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we need new creators, and we need creators to be able to play. And as much as some of the superhero and the other work for hire books I've done, they've been really flexible, and want me to bring myself into it. At the end of the day, it is a license, or it is a IP, or whatever you want to call it. There have to be limitations. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So having those free form spaces to play and creator own, and being able to just run wild with those ideas, that is a valuable part of, like, the creative ecosystem.
It
And
really is.
so, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
like one of my favorite
it's awesome.
superhero stories last year was Chris Sabella from Crowded
Hmm.
got to write for Dark Knight's Death Metal.
Yeah.
And it was such a fun story in that anthology book that they released. And I was like, yes,
Hmm.
this is great. Yeah, let these people with these out there ideas have
Right.
fun with these characters.
Yeah, yeah, and you see that across a lot of these creators. Someone like Donny Cates. Stuff he did in God Country ends up really. He blows up on Thanos and Doctor Strange, and, like, bringing that epic feel to the page. You know what I mean?
Right?
Bringing those qualities of what he was doing so well in his image book across, but not just reproducing the same kind of thing. And I
Yeah.
think you could say the same thing about Josh Williamson, and you can say the same thing about, like, just tons of different creators who are doing awesome stuff right now. Their ability to get their legs on these indie books and show what they can do, and then they kind of flex on these big IPs, but then, if they're smart, not losing touch with those creator owned roots, and still making their own
Yeah.
independent stuff. you know
Exactly. Even
yeah.
back in the what was that big Thor crossover again?
Which one?
It was last year or the year
Sorry.
before. The really big Thor War one, where
Oh
the
my gosh, I know what you're talking about.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm
where
brain
all
farting on the
the
title.
Norse
I
villains
apologize.
came to Earth and started trying to
Oh,
take over.
War of the Realms. War of
That's
the
the one.
Realms.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
got
yeah, yeah.
the McElroy boys and their dad
Yep, yep.
got
Came in
together and
and
did
did a book.
that run
Yep.
on that, and that was some of the most fun Spider-Man and weird bullshit that I've read in a while.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. If you're able to also reach outside of the typical pool and realize that, I mean, Ta-Nehisi Coates reaching out to him and saying, "Hey, you're this really amazing writer. You have all these really cool ideas. We would love for you to come and write Black Panther or whatever."
Right, and it's
And,
been such a brilliant story.
exactly, right. So there's the thing, is that you need to see the potential, or see the a good editor is not just looking at what is, but also trying to think about what could be. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And going to creators that whose work they like and saying, "Look, I love what you're doing here. I want you to come do it for us. Where is the playground we can set up to make this happen?" You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
that's a hard thing to do, but when someone does it well, man, you generate so much goodwill, so much good work, and so much loyalty. There's a reason why I've worked so well with certain editors, and that if they call me up and they say, "Hey, let's do a thing," I'm there, man. Like, I'm there with bells on. Let's go, because they have been good to me, and they know what I like to do, and they want to see me do it well for them. And that's the best thing you could ask for.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's just amazing to watch all of this really starting to develop, and just something about the last 2 years seems to have really flipped a switch for editors over at the big two, and I'm seeing so many
Yeah, I
more
think
of them.
there's really good pools. I think there's also the realization that things had been stagnant, and that we need to shake it up, and let's try stuff out, and but both in terms of the creator pool, but also I think in terms of the titles. Like,
Yeah,
if the MCU movies can take the Guardians of the Galaxy, who was, let's be honest, C-listers, if we
yeah,
were being nice, and turn them into A-listers in the general public's eye. Hell, man, when I was a kid, Iron Man was not an A-lister. Like, not in my head. He was
right.
one of the Avengers, and he had his own solo title, but I didn't know anyone who collected it religiously and he was their favorite
Yeah,
character.
yeah.
And
It
yet
was, for me,
now,
it was like Iron Man, Cap, and whatnot. Spider Man.
right? Spider-Man, X-Men, yeah. And so for me, seeing really confident, amazing storytelling from the movies and the Marvel TV stuff reminds me that there are no bad characters. There are just the way we use them, and the
Mm-hmm.
way we generate drama and intensity, right? And so if the publishing arm's smart, they want to have, yes, you have all your A-list characters, and let's make sure the Avengers book is strong, and Fantastic Four is strong, and whatever else. But you also need to let these secondary and tertiary characters kind of flex to see if you strike gold, because you
Right, and
never know.
if you want to
Yeah,
get those secondary and tertiary characters shining, you
right. You got
you
to
look
try stuff.
for weird writers on
Yes,
indie
yes,
space and go,
yes.
hey,
You
who
got
wants
it.
to write this guy? Because
Yeah. Do you have an idea that would fit this, or shake this concept up at its roots, because it's become staid, and old,
mm-hmm,
and we need something fresh with it, right?
yeah,
And that's the kind of stuff that I think we need to, keeps the whole orchard growing. It's of creativity. It's fun. It's fun to be a part of it,
yeah,
and it's
it
been
is.
fun chatting about this with you, man, as well. It's nice. I'm glad we had a chance to talk. When you first told me about this format, you're like, "We're going to talk about an indie title." I'm used to coming on and doing an interview, and it's always about my own books. And obviously, I'm here to promote my stuff, and I
Yeah,
love the books that I do. But it is kind of fun to be able to brag about someone else's title and go,
right,
"Hey,
and that's what
this
I
is
loved about it.
quality." Yeah,
Yeah, I was
yeah,
originally just, this show started off as the idea of me, I was going to sit down, find some cool indie books, do reviews of them, and I'm
right,
like, no, the internet doesn't need another dude reviewing comics. What can
right.
I do to make this more valuable to the
Sure,
community?
sure.
And so I hit up Frankie and said, hey,
Hmm.
I think I want to do this as a talk show. Do you want to come on and give it a
Right.
shot with me? And we did. Unfortunately, that is the lost episode now because I fucked up the audio.
Oh no.
And I lost Frankie's audio. And we actually talked about
Right.
She, the comic I showed you
Nice.
before.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I've had Frankie back since, and we talked about Met Cadet U, which is another book I really
Cool.
love.
It was a
And I
great
figured
book.
out that like this is better. This gives creators a chance to be seen, but
Right.
also just indulge in the industry and the
Yeah.
hobby of comics.
and we are all fans. Like that's the truth
Exactly.
of it. And when you see a creator doing it well, when you see a team doing it well, when you see a new creator come in with a cool voice and saying really awesome stuff, like I want to meet them. I want to give them kudos. I want to encourage them and be encouraged by them. That's the whole point of this thing and why it works so well.
No,
So, anyways,
that's exactly right.
yeah.
And that's why I
So
think,
thanks for
because
having me on board.
you're welcome. And that's it. Like, we're reaching sort of the end of the episode, so let's do the part where you do actually get to talk about yourself.
Nice.
And what
I'll
have you
just do
got
the
out?
quick. Yeah.
What have you got
Right.
coming out?
Sure. So I just wrapped up a few months ago the Stranger Things and Dungeons and Dragons miniseries. Jody Hauser and I co-wrote it. Diego Galindo drew it. That was put out through Dark Horse and IDW, and it basically fills in the gaps of the kind of D&D games that the Stranger Things kids were playing.
Yeah.
When you didn't see them in the episodes, which was really cool to be able to build and a lot of fun. I'm the monthly writer of Conan the Barbarian at Marvel. I've got some other Marvel stuff in the hopper that's going to be coming to be announced soon. I'm doing one of the Heroes Reborn specials called Young Squadron, which teams me back up with Stephen Cummings, my partner in crime on the old Wayward series at Image.
Yep.
And then on the indie front, Max Dunbar and I just finished up the second arc of Stone Star, which is at Comixology Originals.
Yes, I've been loving Stone Star. I really enjoy it.
It's Max being as awesome as Max always is. Our colorist Espen Grundetjern is one of the best in the industry. He makes Max's stuff just shine in incredible fashion. And then later this year, I'll be releasing we did a Kickstarter for it in the fall, but it's Skull Kickers, Caster Bastards, and the Great Grotesque, which is the 10th anniversary Skull Kickers book and 5th edition role-playing adventure, all in one big tasty book. So those are my main releases right now.
That's going to be really fun. And honestly, Max, if you're listening, your art is goals for me. Seriously, I've got a lot of people whose work
best.
I really admire, but there is something about Max's work that is just like, I want to get
there is
vaguely there.
A ridiculous amount of there. His sense of design is really good. Like I see people who can draw well, but they're not necessarily designers. They can't come up with stuff. They can reproduce other people's designs well, but like Max is a designer. He knows how to make something look cool. And if something already exists, he can amp it up to another level, which is a skill in and of itself.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Awesome.
And it's always fun to watch you guys work on something new because I know I'm going to dig it and I know it's going to be balls to the wall, like really intense and fun.
Thanks, man. Yeah, he's one of those people that I drop anything to do a project with because he just knows. We just have a really good sensibility. We know each other's strengths, and we get into the same headspace about how we want to tell stories, which is all you hope for,
Yeah, goals for me is write a short story and somehow be able to afford Max to illustrate it.
I don't know, man. he's doing stuff over at DC now. One of my fears is that he's going to be gone forever. They're going to realize how amazing he is, and they'll just have him for life at this point. But yeah, it's been fun stuff. So I really appreciate you having me on board.
No, thank you for coming on. I've wanted to connect with you for either this or something D&D related for a while because I dig your work so much. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
No problem.
Yeah, everyone, if you're watching, here is Jim's socials, and here is today's comic in the chat. Go give Jim a follow. Go read Jim's comics, especially Stone Star. Right now, it's top stuff.
Thanks.
I am Sean Sunday. You can find me as Brain Beast Studios or Brain Beast Sean on social media. Join the Discord if you want to chat more about this comic or other comics. I've got a comics chat channel in there. I do the TTRPG stuff. Thanks to putting in some effort last week. I now have a Patreon if you like No Capes and want to help me make it better by affording Zoom. Please go check out Patreon. See if there's anything there that grabs your attention. Every little bit helps me make all these videos and the Shifting Spire bigger and better. And tune in next week for another episode of No Capes to be announced for the guest. And on the Saturday is the next episode of The Shifting Spire with Smuggler's Coffee. We'll see if they get to the top or if they have a TPK. So until next time, this has been No Capes, the show where we talk about creator-owned comics with creators who own comics. This has been Jim Zub, who has been a wonderful sport and has been amazing to talk to. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to roll the teaser for The Shifting Spire, and we'll talk to you later.
Take care.